Quite a stack of reports here, all from our world in data, the Oxford Research Group tracking how the world changes through data. Our mission in this deep dive basically sift through all this and pull out the most important insights for you. And specifically, we're looking at global trends, like what's the most encouraging stuff the data shows, and, well, what's the most troubling?
That's right. And these sources, they're incredibly rich. They cover, gosh, everything from child mortality and famine trends to democracy, economic growth, gender inequality, urbanization, the works. Our world in data paints this really complex picture. You see huge progress, absolutely. But you also see these really significant, stubborn challenges remaining. It's definitely not a simple story.
Exactly. And that complexity is, I think, what makes it so important to look at. So we'll tackle this in two parts. First, let's focus on the positive, the really encouraging trends that the data documents where, humanity's made some amazing strides. Then we'll switch gears and look at the troubling side, the data that shows where we really need to focus more effort.
Right. Let's dive in.
All right, let's start with something that, honestly, when you see the long view our world in data provides, it's kind of astonishing. Global health, specifically child mortality.
Yeah, child mortality, kids dying before they turn 5.
And historically, the scale was just, well, it's almost unimaginable today, isn't it?
Completely. Those charts going back to the 1830s show incredibly high rates, huge fluctuations. For basically all of history, even in places we think of as advanced for their time, a massive chunk of kids just didn't make it. It was
Yeah.
tragically normal.
Yeah, the data shows rates over 30%, sometimes way higher, even in countries that are wealthy now. But then things start to change.
Dramatically,
Yeah.
especially over the last century or two, and accelerating in recent decades. The progress is just phenomenal. Rates have plummeted almost everywhere. Our world in data's work here, showing that long history, really drives home how far we've come.
So what's behind that? Why the huge drop?
Well, the data points very strongly to increased healthcare spending. It's a clear correlation. More spending on health, higher life expectancy, lower child mortality. And here's a really interesting finding from our world in data. The proportional impacts seem similar everywhere. Like, an increase in health spending leads to a similar percentage drop in child mortality in richer and poorer countries.
Really? So the return on investment is high, even if you're starting from a really low level of spending.
Exactly. It suggests that putting resources into basic health yields huge returns in lives saved, pretty much across the board.
That's actually really hopeful, like a clear path forward.
It does feel that way. And speaking of preventing mass tragedies, let's shift to famines.
Famine. Mass starvation. Yeah, a terrifying part of human history.
Okay. And the core finding here from our world in data is incredibly positive. Major deadly famines. They've become much, much rarer in recent decades compared to, say, the first half of the 20th century or earlier. When they do happen now, they tend to be more localized and, thankfully, usually far less deadly than historical famines. It's a huge shift.
Okay, so how did that happen? What drove that change according to the sources?
It looks like a combination of factors, all documented in the data. First, increased food supply, basically. Higher crop yields, thanks to agricultural science. Then better healthcare and sanitation, which matter a lot during food crises. Increased trade helps smooth out local shortages. Food prices have generally come down relative to incomes. And crucially, the big drop in extreme poverty globally.
You're just more resilient.
Exactly. More resilient to shocks.
So this kind of throws cold water on that old Malthusian idea, doesn't it? That population growth just inevitably leads to famine.
It really does. Our world in data shows that even with massive population growth, famine deaths are way, way down. In fact, often the countries with the fastest population growth saw the biggest drops in hunger, because that growth often went hand in hand with economic development, better farming, better infrastructure. So yeah, famine hasn't been the main check on population growth. The real story is the demographic transition, falling death rates and falling birth rates.
Right, driven by development, health, education, not catastrophe.
Really?
Okay, let's move from survival basics to political life, the spread of democratic rights.
Yeah, and this is another one our world in data frames as, frankly, an astonishing achievement. And when you look at the timeline, you see why. Think about it. 200 years ago, almost nobody had democratic rights. The idea of regular people voting, having guaranteed freedoms, virtually non-existent for most humans.
And today, what does the data show?
Today, billions live in countries considered democracies. By the late 90s, it was around 3 billion in electoral or liberal democracies. By 2016, over 3.8 billion. The majority of countries are now democracies, at least by standard classifications. It's a huge expansion of political rights in a relatively short historical time frame.
That scale is pretty incredible. It puts things in perspective.
It does. And closely related to all this development is another big shift, the global decline in the fertility rate.
Right, the number of children per woman. The data's pretty stark there, too.
Oh, yeah. Our World in Data highlights this fact. The global total fertility rate has halved in just 60 years. Halved. Historically, women often had 5, 6, 7 kids or more. Now the global average is much lower, heading towards just over 2. Many countries are below replacement level already.
And what's the main driver, according to the research?
Again, it links back strongly to child mortality. As parents saw more of their kids actually surviving childhood, the sort of perceived need to have many children declined. Demographers talk about hoarding or replacement strategies.
So fewer kids dying meant families chose to have fewer kids.
Exactly. The data shows a strong link, often with a bit of a time lag as norms catch up.
Makes sense. Are there other factors involved, too?
Oh, definitely. The sources mentioned several. Less child labor meant kids weren't needed as much for family income. More education for kids made each child more, well, expensive to raise, and critically, much wider access to family planning and contraception. The impact of things like organized family planning programs like in Bangladesh, or the invention and spread of the pill in places like the US, those are huge. Even things like seeing smaller families depicted in popular media, like telenovelas in Brazil apparently, seem to play a role in shifting norms.
It's fascinating how it all weaves together health, economics, education, culture. Okay, speaking of economics, let's hit that huge one. The decline in extreme poverty.
Right. And the historical perspective from our world in data here is vital. 2 centuries back, extreme poverty was the norm. Most people on Earth literally couldn't afford, as they put it, a tiny space to live, food that would not induce malnutrition, and some minimum heating capacity. Just the absolute basics. That was life for the vast majority.
And then came what the source calls the most important change in economic history.
The Industrial Revolution and everything that followed. Basically, sustained economic growth. This continuous increase in producing more and better goods and services. Think of the jump in productivity they mentioned, like the printing press making thousands of books while a scribe copied one. That kind of leap applied across the economy over time.
And the result, globally, shown in the data.
A dramatic fall in the share of people living in extreme poverty. Across every world region since around 1820. It's one of our world's seasons. In data's core findings, mapping this historical escape from the worst deprivation for billions. Relatively speaking, the world is massively less poor.
A monumental achievement. Okay, just quickly, 2 other positive trends mentioned. The gender pay gap.
Yeah, the data suggests that in most countries where we have good data, that gap has been narrowing in recent decades, especially noticeable in some high-income countries like the US. Increased education for women seems to be a key factor there, closing that particular gap.
Okay. And trade and globalization?
Generally, the trend, documented by our World in Data over the last few decades, has been towards more trade openness globally. And the data tends to show a positive link between trade and growth, firms getting more efficient, that sort of thing. Plus, consumer benefits, lower prices, more variety.
So if we pause here, this first half, drawing on our world in data, it paints a picture of really remarkable progress, doesn't it? Fewer child deaths, fewer famines, more democracy, smaller families by choice, billions escaping extreme poverty, even some narrowing of gender pay gaps, more trade.
Absolutely. That progress is real, it's documented, and it's crucial context for understanding where the world is today compared to the past.
Right. But, as we said at the start, it's not the whole picture. Now we need to look at the flip side, the troubling trends that the data also highlights. Let's go back to child mortality. The progress was amazing, yes, but that our World in Data report opens with a statistic that just stops you in your tracks.
It really does. It's that vital reminder. Progress isn't victory. We still live in a world where 5 million children die before age 5, every single year.
5 million.
Which works out, as they state, to 10 children every minute.
10 children every minute. It's heartbreaking. The sheer scale of loss still happening despite all that progress.
And the data just screams inequality here. A child's risk of dying in their first month or first few years is vastly different depending on where they're born. It's still tightly linked to national income. So even as the global average improves, this huge gap between rich and poor countries in child survival remains a massive troubling issue, clearly shown in the data.
Progress is real, but it's deeply, deeply unequal.
Okay.
How about democracy? We celebrated the expansion, but you mentioned setbacks.
Exactly. Our World in Data is clear. Democratic rights have spread, but they are still far from universal.
Hmm.
And here's the really sobering part. Because the world's population has grown so much, even though a smaller percentage of people lack democratic rights today compared to, say, 200 years ago,
Wait, let me get this straight.
the total number of people living without democratic rights is actually higher than ever before in human history.
Wow. So proportionally fewer, but absolutely more people lack rights because there are just so many more people overall.
Precisely. The population grew faster than democracy spread. And the source gives that stark recent example, India, home to 1.4 billion people,
Great.
reclassified by some key metrics as an electoral autocracy in 2017. That single change meant a huge number of people statistically experienced a rollback in political rights recently. It really underscores that progress isn't guaranteed. It can go backwards.
That really challenges any sense of inevitable progress. Okay, let's dive deeper into gender inequality. We noted the pay gap narrowing, which is good, but the sources showed just how much inequality is left and how complicated it is.
Oh, absolutely. Substantial gaps persist. No question.
Yeah.
Our world in data shows that even as the overall pay gap shrinks in some places, why it persists changes. Factors like differences in the occupations and industries women and men work in have become more important in explaining the gap, say, in the U.S. recently. And while the unexplained bit, but maybe due to pure wage discrimination for the same job might be smaller, the source rightly warns that discrimination can be baked into getting the job in the first place.
Right, so it's not just unequal pay for equal work, it's also unequal access to the higher paying work.
Exactly. That's a key nuance the data helps reveal. And then there's the clear motherhood penalty. Women's earnings often take a hit after having kids, even in countries with good family leave. That points to something deeper, structural or cultural.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the sheer volume of unpaid care work. Globally, women do vastly more of it. The India example is staggering, women doing nearly 10 times the hours of unpaid care work compared to men.
Yeah, childcare, elder care, cooking, cleaning, all that essential stuff that enables everything else, but it falls disproportionately on women, limiting their paid work time and options.
Precisely. And it's not just norms. The data points to places where there are still explicit legal barriers. Our world in data shows countries where laws actually prevent women from doing the same jobs as men.
Actual laws, in this day and age, that's hard to believe.
It is, but the data shows it exists. And then look at leadership. Globally, only about 18% of firms have a woman as the top manager. Women are way underrepresented at the top of the income ladder, and that gap closes more slowly at the very, very top.
While at the same time being overrepresented in lower paying jobs.
Yes, the data shows that too. Examples from the U.S. highlight jobs like childcare, home health aides, housekeeping heavily dominated by women, and typically low paid. Less power at the top, concentrated at the bottom.
And it goes beyond work and pay, doesn't it? Control over resources.
Yes, this was a really troubling finding from our world in data. In many countries, especially low-income ones, a significant share of women aren't involved in decisions about how to spend the money they themselves earned,
Wow, even their own earnings.
especially in poorer households. It signals major power imbalances within the family. Plus, you see documented gender gaps in owning land or getting access to loans for starting a business.
And underneath a lot of this, the sources suggest are these stubborn social norms, like the idea that a man should earn more than his wife.
Yes, those cultural beliefs, often reinforced through media or family expectations, are identified in the research as real barriers, working alongside the structural and legal issues. It's a really tangled web.
Okay, let's quickly circle back to famines, globally rare now, but you said they still happen under specific circumstances.
Right. The sources are clear. Today's major deadly famines are almost always linked to conflict. War wrecks food production, blocks trade routes, spreads disease, and critically prevents humanitarian aid getting through.
Hmm.
So while the global resilience is higher, conflict remains the key trigger for that kind of catastrophe today.
Got it. Healthcare again. We saw the positive spending link, but also issues with financing and access.
Yeah, one issue highlighted, particularly using U.S. data from our world in data, is the inequality within the system. Spending is heavily concentrated. The top 1% of spenders account for over 20% of all healthcare costs. The report suggests this points to inequality beyond just differences in need, hinting at unequal access based on ability to pay or navigate the system.
So issues of fairness in who gets what care.
Exactly. And in many low-income countries, a huge barrier is just the sheer amount people have to pay out of pocket. Often over half of all health spending comes directly from individuals, not insurance or government. That's a massive hurdle for poor families. And then there's that odd trend. Donor funding for health often drops off sharply as countries get a bit richer. Even though, as we discussed, the data shows the biggest health gains per dollar often come at those lower levels of initial spending.
Hmm. Yeah, that seems counterintuitive. Pulling back just when the investment seems most effective.
It does seem like a potential missed opportunity, based on the evidence presented.
Okay, nearly there. Urbanization. More people in cities, but are they living well?
That's the challenge. Urbanization is happening fast, but our world in data highlights that globally, nearly 1 in 4 city dwellers still lives in what's defined as a slum household. That means lacking basics like decent water or sanitation, enough living space, durable housing, or secure tenure, knowing you won't just be evicted.
That's worse in some regions than others.
Much worse in some. Sub-Saharan Africa stands out in the data, where, in many countries, it's over half the urban population living in those conditions. So, yes, cities are growing, but ensuring decent living standards for everyone in them is a huge ongoing challenge.
And even just measuring this accurately is tricky, isn't it? Different countries defining urban or slum differently.
Yes, that makes precise global counts hard, leading to conflicting estimates sometimes. But the scale of the problem within regions is still pretty clear from the data available.
Okay, last point then, circling back to poverty and growth. We celebrated the fall in extreme poverty, but our world in data uses higher poverty lines too, which tell a more sobering story.
They absolutely do. While that $2.15 a day extreme poverty line shows huge progress, if you lift the bar just a bit, the picture changes dramatically. Using a $6.85 a day line, our world in data statistics show 47% of the world, nearly half, still lives in poverty. And using a $30 a day line, it's 84%.
Wow, so only about 16% of the world lives on more than $30 a day? That really reframes the scale of global poverty, doesn't it?
It really does. The data makes it plain. Global inequality is still very large. And the author ends that section with a quote that I think really sticks with you: balancing the progress and the task ahead. Even after 2 centuries of progress, we are still in the early stages. The history of global poverty reduction has only just begun.
The history of global poverty reduction has only just begun.
Yeah, that really captures the whole deep dive, doesn't it? This dual reality from our world in data sources.
It does. It sums up that complex picture perfectly. The world is so much better in critical ways than it used to be. And at the same time, it's still deeply unfair, faces huge challenges, but also holds the potential to be much, much better still.
So pulling it all together from these Our World in Data reports, we saw incredible encouraging trends: child mortality, famines plummeting, democracy spreading to billions, families choosing fewer children, billions escaping the worst poverty, some progress on gender pay gaps, benefits from trade. Really huge achievements. Absolutely massive gains documented clearly in the data. But then the troubling side. 5 million kids still dying each year, with huge inequalities, more people than ever in absolute numbers lacking democratic rights. Gender inequality, still deeply entrenched in pay, work, power, and norms. Famine still possible due to conflict. Healthcare access still deeply unequal. Hundreds of millions in urban slums. And the majority of the world still living in poverty by modest standards.
Understanding both sides of that coin, the amazing progress and the huge remaining challenges, feels so crucial for just, having an informed view of the world and thinking about where we go from here. The sources make it clear that so much of the progress came from human choices, right? Innovations, policies, public health efforts, changing norms. And the problems that remain are also often linked to human systems conflict, discrimination, market failures, resistant social norms.
That link is undeniable. So it makes you think, doesn't it? Given how much human choices have shaped both the good and the bad trends shown in this data, what really stands out to you, our listener, as the most surprising thing from this deep dive? And maybe more importantly, how much more progress is possible if we really focus our collective intelligence and effort, informed by this kind of data, on tackling those persistent, troubling trends?